Nona. I'm back for another episode of Reading the Wrong Way. So, summer of last year, I introduced you to my obsession with Alice in Wonderland and the manga series known as Alice in the Country of Hearts. Now that Yen Press and Seven Seas have really picked up on the spin-off series, I thought it was about time to review each of the individual spin-offs that have been licensed here in the Western world, split up by which country they take place in. If you're new to the series or didn't see my last video about it, hi! Let me give you a brief overview about how the original Alice in the Country of Hearts series plays into the spin-offs. In the original, Alice Little is having a nap in her garden when she's kidnapped by a man with white rabbit ears called Peter. She is forced to play a game in which she must interact with the world's inhabitants in order to return home. But the inhabitants are all at war with each other and brandish deadly weapons, making her task dangerous and potentially life-threatening. While trying to find her way back home, Alice is dragged, literally, into a world that is more of a nightmare than a sweet dream. This series is originally based on a romance-adventure visual novel called Hato no Kuni no Arisu Wonderful Wonder World. The spin-offs play very similar to how a dating simulator would. In each of the subsequent series, think of it as a single branch off of the main series in which Alice chooses to fall in love with a single character. The main series and every spin-off is written by Quinn Rose, the Japanese game developer responsible for the game series. This is important to consider when comparing stories to the original in terms of character development and continuity. Wonderland itself is divided into at least 3 different countries so far, which I will be using to divide the spin-offs. Those countries are the Country of Hearts, the Country of Clover, and of course the Country of Diamonds. Today we'll be looking at the series that take place in the Country of Hearts, the same country the original series was based on, as well as the only Alice Love Fables book currently released in the West. We've got a lot to cover, so let's dive right in. All of the series I'm going to show you today are rated OT for older teen, which is generally considered 16+. I think this is an appropriate rating. The spin-offs tend to be a bit more explicit than the original series due to its overall nature of Alice choosing a lover. The spin-offs deal a fair amount in sexual encounters, questionable love such as an abusive partner, loss, commitment to family versus commitment to oneself, violence, and suicide. Now, none of these subjects are really the main topics in any of the books, rather only for a few pages, but I felt they were worth mentioning for parents looking into this series for their children. The sex scenes in this country never go further than kissing on the neck or an appropriately drawn picture implying that clothes are being removed. There's no nudity, and the panels always cut away during the actual sex, usually showing Alice lying in bed with her love interest beside her afterwards. Of the books yet to be released, there aren't any more volumes confirmed that take place in Hearts. However, there are 4 other Alice Love fables that could potentially be licensed for a Western release. We'll begin with the Mad Hatter's Late Night Tea Party featuring Blood Dupre. In this 2-book series, Alice has decided to live in Hatter Mansion, home to the Hatter family mafia. Blood Dupre is the leader of this mafia, with his closest comrades being the March Hare Elliot and the Bloody Twins Dee and Dum. They are a group that follows the policy of shoot first, ask questions later. Blood is very manipulative in nature, acting quite gentlemanly towards Alice, only to follow it quickly with sexual innuendo or an insult. He doesn't hesitate to force himself on her, and it's difficult for her to tell if he truly loves her or if he merely sees her as entertainment to pass the time. Along with discovering the Country of Hearts, Alice must get past the fact that Blood has the face of her former lover, and sort out her feelings for Blood. Overall, I think these books fairly represent Blood's twisted character, while providing new information that wasn't revealed in the original. Keeping with the Hatter's theme, we'll move along to My Fanatic Rabbit featuring Elliot March the March Hare. Elliot is Blood's second in command, a precise killer on the job but a carrot-loving sweetheart at tea parties. After spending some time at Hatter Mansion, Alice finds herself falling for Elliot's childish charms, but refuses to believe she's worthy enough to deserve someone's affections. Peter comes along to throw a wrench in things, and Elliot must realize his own feelings in order to rescue her from enemy territory. I would say this book fairly represents Elliot. He can be deadly serious one minute and laughing with a big goofy smile the next. He seems to act far more childish than in previous versions, getting flustered and pouting quite often. I almost think this was done to continue the running gag of Alice fawning over his furry ears, which is honestly quite creepy in this series. Elliot's dynamic with Blood Dupre is also quite off to me. In the other series, Blood does care for him even if he doesn't outwardly say it, but in this series his abusive nature extends even to Elliot. Right at the beginning of the first volume, Elliot even states that I've never had anyone worry about me before, which made me really wonder how their relationship dissolved so quickly between the original and the spin-off. I also want to mention that Peter doesn't rhyme when he speaks as he does in the other spin-offs. I personally thought that that was a cute quirk that made him even more unique. We'll continue on with the Clockmaker's story featuring Julius Monray the Clockmaker. There's only one volume to this spin-off. Julius is the leader and only inhabitant of the clock tower, the only neutral ground between the three feuding territories. He's cold and distant, always lost in his work repairing clocks in the tower. When Peter pushes Alice over the edge, she must seek refuge in the clock tower, much to Julius's dismay. But is the clockmaker really as cold as he appears? And why does he have so many clocks to fix when no one in Wonderland appears to carry them around? This series was our first really deep look at Julius, and his job as the clockmaker. I think it represented a nice side of Julius rarely seen in the original series. There's also quite a bit of interaction with Ace the Knight of Hart Castle in this series. We're going to stick with Julius in his second single-volume spin-off with Alice, Love Labyrinth of Thorns. Julius is still the distant, dutiful clockmaker of the tower, and Alice has been staying with him since the beginning, not staying at any of the other territories first. They bicker all of the time like an old married couple until Julius eventually kicks Alice out of the only place she's known as home in Wonderland. With neither able to admit their true feelings, Nightmare steps in to shake things up a bit, kidnapping Alice and leaving her rescue to the hands of a man who's cold to her. This series is very similar to the first spin-off with Alice. Both of them act exactly the same, unable to admit their true feelings. I feel like this one is a little bit lighter in mood since Alice already has knowledge of the clock's true meaning in this one. It also features more interference from Ace than the first, as he tries to be Julius's wingman, as well as a fair amount of interaction with Nightmare, a mysterious being who we'll be seeing more of in Clover. Finally, we have the first Western-released Alice Love Fables spin-off called Toy Box. These are different from the regular Alice books in that instead of being an Alice book per se, it contains short stories written by Quinn Rose. This is one of those books that may not interest you unless you're a completionist due to the price of the series. About a third of the book is short Alice stories, while the beginning of the book features Arabians Lost, a series that has yet to be licensed for Western publishing, and the end features Crimson Empire, which is heavily previewed in many of the earlier Alice releases. As far as the Alice stories are concerned, each one is a very quick little short featuring different characters from both Hearts and Clover. We'll discuss the Clover ones next time, so let's dive into the Hearts ones. The first story centers around Dee and Dum, the bloody twins that guard Hatter Mansion's gates, and by guard, I mean doing anything but guarding the gates. We'll learn more about them in Clover. The second features Julius, taking place after the other two standalones, where Julius and Alice are officially a couple. It shows a bit more reason as to why Julius prefers to remain in the tower than travel in Wonderland like everyone else. The final Heart short story features Elliot and takes place after My Fanatic Rabbit. It spends most of the pages showing the more childish side of Elliot, as well as more of Alice's obsession with his ears. So now that you have all of the summaries, what do you need to know about all of these series as a whole? Every series includes colored pictures at the beginning of them except for My Fanatic Rabbit. These volumes also include a quick summary of what happened in the original story, as well as short bios of the characters that will appear in the story. If you've never read the original series, you can essentially pick these up thanks to these pages, but it's far more rewarding if you pick up the original series first. It's also worth noting that My Fanatic Rabbit is the only one in this country that isn't printed at the usual 8x6 format for this series. It's about 7.5 by 5 inches. This isn't a problem really unless you're incredibly picky about all of your books being the same size for a series. One great exception My Fanatic Rabbit has that there are no previews at the end of either book. Every other volume of the Alice books, particularly those in Clover, have previews of other Yum Press titles in the backs of them. The Heart series isn't littered too terribly with previews, with the exception of the Clockmaker story. At the end of the Clockmaker story, like many of the Clover volumes, is a single chapter excerpt from Crimson Empire, followed by a few pages from Kanokon. These previews take up about 1/3 of the book's pages, which could have been spent on a longer story arc with Julius. This is something to consider when purchasing the volumes if you really want the most Alice story for your money, considering these books are above the average price of $9.99 at $13.99 per volume. If you're concerned about it and interested in buying one of these books, feel free to leave me a comment down below and I'll tell you how long the previews in that book are. I own every volume that's been released so far from Hearts, Clover, and the Joker series, so I can give you an actual page count. If you're watching this after October, I'll have the Diamond series started as well. Moving right along, the artwork for all of the series is very shoujo in style. For every book in the spin-off series, there's generally a different artist in charge of each separate story. I must admit that most of the time I actually have to read the cover to tell a different artist did the illustrations. There are only 2 series out of all the spin-offs where I'll never have to do that, and I don't mean that in the best way, but we'll get to that next month. The lines are always clean and delicate, with all of the characters, including the males in my opinion, looking quite pretty as is expected in any shoujo manga. I would say the only one in this set that strikes me as different would be my fanatic rabbit. Of course, right? I don't mean that in a bad way, as it's incredibly easy to identify the characters. I would say they just look a bit more mature and bolder, for lack of better terms. It never distracted me from the book at any point, unlike said other books we'll be seeing next month. Sigh. There's always great care taken to the backgrounds and shading, which really brings Wonderland to life, especially My Fanatic Rabbit, with their fantastic use of screen tones on the characters' clothing. There are bonus comics at the end of each volume, and usually one on the back cover drawn by the artist, which don't usually relate to the events in the book and are very comedic in nature. Many artists also draw stills of the characters on their personal thank you pages. The only exception to this is, of course, My Fanatic Rabbit. So that wraps up the Country of Hearts. If you stuck by till the end of the video, you rock! Again, if you have any questions about any of the volumes showcased here today or about the series in general, leave a comment down below and I'll try my best to answer it. I'll see you back here next month when we tackle what is currently the largest country in terms of volumes, the Country of Clover. See you next time!
When I was given freedom, oh, all I did was flee. When I turned back, there was nothing to see. You close your doors before I could open mine.